Oh, is it Zangara or Vangara?
Zangara. He was an Italian immigrant, and he became obsessed that Hoover was going to be a dictator, and then when he couldn't get to Hoover, Roosevelt was. And so when Roosevelt was down in Miami, Florida, February 15, 1933, and remember, this is the worst time for the country since the Civil War. Literally, the country seemed to be falling apart. Roosevelt was giving a speech. He was there with the governor of Chicago, governor of Miami, a few other dignitaries, and just basically, he was getting the heck away from Albany and Washington, D.C. because he's not yet president. Giuseppe, who Zangara was 4'8", 4'9", he went to where Roosevelt was speaking. Roosevelt gave a very short speech, and he got to about 25 feet away. The problem was he couldn't see him because he couldn't see over the crowd. So he got up on a rickety folding chair, started moving around, and put his arm up as high as he could to shoot over the crowd, because he still could barely see.
Wait, what's this, like a giant crowd or
No.
something? Or what?
He's not very big, so he couldn't see. 1933, February 15th. And he unloaded his revolver towards Roosevelt. Missed him. It hit the governor, or the mayor of Chicago, who died 2 days later, and wounded a couple other men. But Roosevelt did not get killed. And this is one of the most amazing what-ifs in history. If Roosevelt would have been hit, there would have been a constitutional crisis. It's not clear what you do. Roosevelt's president-elect. He has not been inaugurated, and neither is vice president. It was not clear. It is now.
What happens now?
What happens? I would go to the vice president.
Of the previous?
No. When the new president would be the vice president, he would have to appoint a new president, or vice president approved by Congress. Back then, it wasn't clear. This could have been a crisis. And the country appeared to be teetering on the brink. In fact, it was. It didn't matter how strong or weak the country was. People felt, they believed it was teetering. That's all it takes. And so Roosevelt getting into office was very important. People were paying attention to what he did. Now, Hoover tried to contact the president-elect a week or 2 weeks before the inauguration and tried to get Roosevelt to agree to come out for a banking bill that Hoover wanted to stop the free fall, the bank panic. Now, Roosevelt, for very good reason, said no. He wanted nothing to do with it. I'm not president yet. I can't be tied to your programs, and I don't have the power yet. Lincoln would do the same thing about the Crittenden Compromise and the 13th Amendment when he was president-elect. Hoover was furious. And then the bank panic got worse. And so when Roosevelt's inaugurated,
Wait, so what was the bill?
it's just a banking bill. He just said no because it's Hoover's bill. He's not yet president. He's not going to do anything until he's president. Watch, the bill will come up. It's a bill about banks, but Roosevelt would eventually do almost the same thing, so I'll show you in a second. We're going to watch a little bit of New York New Deal. That's the same series of the Great Depression we saw Road to Rock Bottom, because it starts in New York and then talks a little bit about some of the first New Deal bills. Goes back to New York, so we're not going to watch that. But I like how it covers it. I like the interviews. And it mentions Fiorella LaGuardia. And LaGuardia was a representative and then would become the very liberal Republican governor of New York. When I say governor of New York, I meant mayor of New York City. So, this is where I'm going to start. With a fur coat on. New York City was hit with tens of thousands of unemployed. Some of the biggest Hoover bills in the country were in New York City. So this is where we start. No,
but in March of 1933, the homeless and the poor lost an advocate in Congress. Defeated in the Democratic landslide, LaGuardia returned to a New York where victims of the Depression camped in cardboard shanties. LaGuardia swore he would give up politics, but few believed he would stay on the sidelines if Roosevelt's New Deal could help the city of New York.
History turns a page. President and Mrs. Hoover, leaving the White House after 4 trying years, greet Mrs. Roosevelt on the portico. The President-elect awaits them in the car in which he and Mr. Hoover will ride to the Capitol together. Retiring President and the new, the man who bore the burdens and the man who now assumes them.
Okay, so Hoover did not want to go to the inauguration at all. He was furious at Roosevelt for the issue of not agreeing with him on the banks, but also he thought Roosevelt was going to destroy the country. Only 2 presidents did not go to their successor inauguration, both Adamses. And Hoover didn't want to go, but they convinced him he had to. What would people think about the country if you don't even go to the inauguration? So when he went there, he was mad. He greeted Eleanor Roosevelt, got into the car. Now, Roosevelt, like a lot of the great politicians, was just filled to the brim with charm. He's just so charming, and he knew it. He could charm anybody. At least he thought he could. You know, talk to them, bring them in, make them feel like they're both agreeing. In fact, the story was that when people would go see Roosevelt as president, they'd have a policy idea. So they come up with something, and they would make their argument. They would walk out of that meeting with Roosevelt thinking 2 things. First off, Roosevelt agrees with me 100%, and I have a new best friend, and his name is Franklin Roosevelt. The next person could walk in with the exact opposite point of view on the same issue and walk out of there thinking 2 things. What's number 1? He agrees with everything I said, and number 2, I got it. Bill Clinton had a little bit of that. It's a valuable gift for a politician. And he tried to do it to Hoover. So Hoover sat next to him, and Roosevelt started talking to him. And Hoover said, hello. He kept talking. Now, Roosevelt's son's right in front of him, so this is what Roosevelt's son said. He's kind of listening to this. And Roosevelt kept talking, and finally Hoover just turned, looked at him, and goes, "Rah!" And that's it. That's all Hoover would say to him. And then Roosevelt's like, I still won.
He's like, what?
Huh? Now, this inaugural address was broadcast nationwide, and everybody was listening. There's never been an inauguration address that has had more people listen and pay attention, because people wanted to know, will this new president save the country? That's how desperate people were thinking. It's over if we have somebody else.
An historical moment in the life of a nation is approaching.
I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis. Broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe.
Now, just hear a little bit of his voice. We'll hear him again. Remember how Hoover and those other presidential candidates sounded? He had a great voice. And it was the combination of a commanding patrician voice, but also he sounded like he was speaking bluntly and fairly to people. He had a gift. You know, they all try to do that now. And you're not going to listen to the whole speech. It is a fantastic speech. And, you know, speeches don't necessarily change things. The point about speeches are it gives an attitude, an opinion, a feeling about which way to go. But I'll read you a couple lines. I wish I could do his accent. And there's one more guy we'll see in a second. If I could do his accent, that'd be the only accent I would do. Maybe I go back and forth, and I would annoy everybody. Awesome. I know what you're thinking. But you already do. I know, but not enough. This great nation will endure as it has endured, will revive and will prosper. So first of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Now, if you think about it, all of you have heard, right? You have nothing left to fear, or nothing to fear but fear itself. You've all heard that, right? in context. This is a great nation. We will prosper. We will be back on top. Do not fear. Have hope in the banking system, the financial system, in the system. Have faith in whom? Me and the government. We will solve your problems. And it's pretty shocking because it would take the Vietnam War, Watergate, and, well, frankly, those who don't want government regulations. They've done a marvelous job getting people to not trust the government. Just an incredible job. There's a purpose for that. There's a political reason they wanted that. It's not because government was doing a bad job. They just didn't want government to do what government was doing. But they didn't have that feeling then. And then there's one more part to read. The money changers have fled from their high seat in the temple of our civilization. We may now restore that temple to the ancient truths. The measure of the restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort. Who are the money changers? Yeah, the bankers, the Wall Street bankers. The money changers, by the way, that's what kind of reference? What's he referring to? Anyone know? The New Testament. That's a reference to the New Testament of the Bible. And so it's a Christian reference. And one more thing. What caused the problem then? He said it right there. You know, come on, you know, this is the problem. But what caused the crash? Well, fear of the system makes it worse. The money changers have fled the system. What caused the problem? We will restore that temple to the ancient truths. The measure of restoration modesty and extent will we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money. Greed. Greed. So, caused it. We got to do something to curtail greed. And that was a message that people wanted to hear. And they're right. You know. So, let's watch a little bit more. Play.
The energy that was let loose right after that inauguration was enormous. Washington had never known anything like it.
Sure.
Stylistically, there was just this abundance of movement and activity and a sense of let's get on with the problem. And you felt that this guy came and he's going to save the people. And a tremendous feeling for him. Holy hell, the people are going to kiss his toenails. That's how much they love this guy.
I think he was primarily a person who was convinced that there was poverty in the country, need in the country, and he wanted to do something to help. New York had declared a bank holiday for the banks in New York, but Roosevelt followed it up with a bank holiday for the national government and throughout the country.
By early 1933, Americans were lining up to withdraw their money from a banking system on the brink of collapse.
He's telling the depositor, that's the banker, the president of the bank. He's saying, we don't have any money. That took a lot of guts, didn't it? Most of them just left in the middle of the night.
Roosevelt closed the banks for 4 days.
4-day bank holiday.
And pushed through an emergency banking bill authorizing $2 billion in new money to help pay off depositors.
So, Roosevelt would pass the emergency banking bill. We'll push it through Congress. This is very close to what Hoover wanted. Not only would it do the bank holiday, it would pump $2 billion in to make up for what the banks didn't have. $2 billion. A lot of money back then.
How much was it now? How much is it now?
Well, remember TARP in 2008 was $700 billion, and then the Federal Reserve pumped an additional $50 trillion. $1 trillion is a lot of money. If you stack $1 trillion $1 bills from this desk up, it would be really high. Okay, so you thought I was going to say like go to the moon. I know it's something like that. I can't remember. it would make it easy to approve. It actually is like to the moon. It's something unbelievable. The facts. And so then he claimed that bank inspectors were going to go out and they would not allow the banks to reopen until they're inspected. Did everyone catch that? They're going to inspect the banks. Did they have bank inspectors? It was an illusion. They didn't really have any. This is a gamble. Will people believe after the emergency banking bill that the banks will be safe? If they don't believe, this is huge. But then he did something amazing. He went to talk to the people. And what did we call these?
Fireside chats.
Fireside chats.
The new president went on radio with the first of his fireside chats.
I want to tell you what has been done in the last few days, why it was done, and what the next steps are going to be. I recognize that the many proclamations from state capitals and from Washington,
he made listeners feel as though he were talking to them and to them individually and alone. And this was a remarkable technique that he had.
Roosevelt would caress with his voice the microphone.
You can tell he's a novelist.
And he treated the people as though they had intelligence.
Let us
That's a big
unite
deal.
in banishing fear.
I think you're smart.
We
I
have
think you deserve to
provided
know
the
truth.
machinery to restore our financial system, and it is up to you to support and make it work. It is your problem, my friends, no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail.
I remember in those days, if you went through any area during the fireside chats, you could hear them walking down the street. You didn't have to worry about getting home in order to hear it, because it would be turned on all the way home.
We would ourselves sit down and talk over what he had said. And then we would look at what was happening all around about us, but still come out feeling good about it, feeling better than we had felt, though we had problems.
We were a serious country. The people had something to do with the government, and they felt in Roosevelt they had somebody who understood them, somebody who spoke to them. Other politicians found him mendacious and tricky, which indeed he was, but he was also had a direct pipeline to the people.
And
When the banks reopened, deposits exceeded withdrawals.
it worked.
Roosevelt had restored confidence, not only in the banks,
And here's
but in the possibility of
cartoon.
recovery.
So here's Roosevelt. They're all going to the bank, protected by the government.
In the first 100 days of the New Deal, Roosevelt and Congress created 10 new agencies to combat the effects of the Depression.
Oh, give countries back.
The alphabet's
So they called it the 100 days. The first 100 days, where Roosevelt would get 13 major bills and 10 big government agencies. Roosevelt understood something very important. We have a honeymoon period, especially since the emergency banking bill worked. I need to get bills passed. I need to get bills passed now. Exactly. While he's popular. Now, as it turned out, he'd have a couple times where he could do this. Most presidents don't. And the thing is, Roosevelt, this is what we have to get down, would try anything. He'd try anything. Experiment. He's going to try stuff. And if it works, he'll try something different. Or if it doesn't work, he'll try something different. If it works, he'll try something different. Yeah, he didn't quite understand. Now, you can see why the alphabet soup, all the programs, there's some we're going to have to know. We're going to have a quiz over it tomorrow, remember? Thought one more thing. You notice the ladle is called the brain trust. Roosevelt did something that's not only smart, but it's also clever politically. He brought in trained professionals, college professors, economists, political scientists, agrarian economists, into his cabinet and into his advisors. They called it the brain trust. What a brilliant move. And so they could argue, these are the smartest people dealing with the toughest problems. And they're not in for personal greed. They're not like Andrew Mellon, who got himself big tax cuts. These are true professionals. It's kind of that progressive idea. Remember, Roosevelt kind of was a progressive, even though he called himself, I said this yesterday, didn't he? What did he call himself? Oh, I didn't say it to you guys? I thought I did. Roosevelt looked at it as his idea of experimentation and try and see what works as, write down, liberal. And that became the modern connotation of liberal. It's not laissez-faire capitalism. It's not socialism. It's in the middle. It's liberal. Well, liberal was used before, but more of the modern terminology of it. Liberal had been done before, but he gave kind of a true meaning to it, at least until the 1960s. Oh, we'll get to it. We'll get to it.
Soup of New Deal programs had immediate impact on the lives of millions of Americans.
Here's the first one we have to get. The first bill.
The first jobs program, the Civilian Conservation Corps, put 250,000 young men to work restoring the nation's forests.
So, this Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, 250,000 is basically 17 to 20-year-olds who are, the unemployment rate was shockingly high for that age. It's always high. And it's not a huge program. But it was the first attempt to get money into people's hands. Get recovery going, relief and recovery. And those of you who were freshmen, did you go to Lewis and Clark Caverns or been to Lewis and Clark Caverns? Yeah. They're the ones who built the trail through the cavern so you can walk through it. Before it was very dangerous. You had to go ropes and little ladders to go through it. The CCC did it. Now, the thing was, it's small. But it's that first effort. It's going to be looked back as just really popular. Here's the next
Roosevelt preferred a system of work relief to giving out welfare checks. But the president decided he had to push for direct federal relief, or millions would starve.
This was a absolutely new program for the federal government to be engaged in, that is to be handing out relief. It wasn't much handed out on any level, and suddenly for it to be a major program with millions of dollars involved, with people getting money for nothing, as it was said by the opposition to it.
President Roosevelt has given me the job.
That's Harry Hopkins, Roosevelt's most trusted advisor. And he would be the administrator of the Federal Emergency Relief Act, FARA. And these are all on that chart I gave you. These are on the chart. $500 million, direct relief. Now this goes completely against trickle-down economics because direct relief can actually in the long run raise wages, and it goes against, it's not, social Darwinists hate this. But it really affected the economy. Even a small program like this, direct money to the poor will multiply the economy very quickly because of one simple reason. What happens to poor people when they get money? What's the first thing they do? They spend it because they haven't been able to spend any money. They buy crazy things like food, and shelter, clothes. Well, it multiplies in the economy. To give you an idea of what this, something will also come out of this called unemployment insurance. And for every $1 of unemployment insurance that's given to people who have been laid off of their job for bad economy, whatever, it multiplies in the economy. For every $1, it's anywhere from $2.50 to $3 in the economy.
How does that work?
Think you go to the store, you buy something, so that has, so that only allows the store to buy more. That means it goes to the producer who made that product to buy more, et cetera, et cetera. And it's called a multiplier effect.
Of administering the $500 million appropriated by Congress under the Emergency Relief Act of 1933 to health care for the 18 million persons whom the Depression had plunged from self-support to public dependency.
In his first 2 hours on the job, Harry Hopkins dispensed $5 million in relief funds.
I came to work for the FERA, the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, in September of 1933. We were a group of young people. For most of us, this was our first job. And we were terribly wrapped up in what we were doing, very excited about it, felt that the future of the world depended upon us.
So there was never any difference between work in the office and being away from the office. When we went to eat or to restaurants or go even taking our wives dancing that hot fall up on the roof of the Powhatan Hotel, very few people danced. They talked the whole time.
And you know, it's him, that's his wife, is the first woman. I like how they have these two because of a couple things. First off, they're so proud of what they did. I think that's really cool. You know, they really felt like they were doing something, but they're really focused on it. But the other thing is, what the New Deal did, at least at first, is they brought in people that really believed in the programs. You know, they brought in people that are really going to work hard for that program. This is not just some government job. You remember that term patronage? Here's a government job so you get kind of rich and political power, the spoil system. No, they believed it. This doesn't happen all that often in government. Unfortunately, they bring people in for other reasons.
We're talking about our jobs.
Eleanor Roosevelt would get literally thousands of letters a day.
Yeah,
and
all these people would write her.
Poor Harry Hopkins would get the brunt of them, with my grandmother writing on the top in hand, "Harry, can't we do something about this person?"
Now we're getting to the NRA.
With the government programs underway, Roosevelt turned his attention to the private
So I'm
sector.
put down NRA, and then I'll tell you exactly. The Blue Eagle.
Blue Eagle's loyal legions on parade. Soldier and sailor, millionaire and office boy, society matron and shop girl, elbow to elbow in the NRA Army. 250,000 economic warriors forming the greatest peacetime demonstration in American history.
In September 1933, the government sponsored a spectacular parade up New York's Fifth Avenue to promote an unprecedented federal effort, the National Recovery Administration. Roosevelt called the NRA a partnership in planning between government and industry. Its goal, to speed recovery by establishing profit levels for business and wage levels for labor.
So what the NRA did was, it was going to set production, profits, and wages for all companies. It was going to be like the War Production Administration, or the War Productions Board during World War I. Roosevelt kind of looked idealistically back to this and thought, that's a good idea. What if we make this huge government bureaucracy to make sure that nobody's producing things that they don't need, overproducing, gouging, paying not enough. So everyone got that. It's going to be go back to World War I idea. The problem was the War Productions Board didn't work in World War I. Roosevelt was wrong. And it would, yeah.
So when was the National Rifle Association? When did the other NRA come around?
The National Rifle Association was created after the Civil War because Northerners were so bad at shooting. And then in 1976, the NRA was taken over by gun manufacturers in Cincinnati.
So who was running the NRA before?
Gun manufacturers. Before, it was just a hunting and gun safety. So the NRA. So you notice I have the blue eagle up there to the left of the. We do our part. It's got a sprocket in one hand and lightning bolts. The NRA. It also would allow for labor unions. Put down section 7A.
In a show of national solidarity, more than 2 million employers across the country promised to abide by the NRA
All these
codes.
groups joined it.
NRA means to me a steady job with both pay and the extra time has been handy. I got a new job and it's great to be working again.
Thanks to President Roosevelt's plan, the NRA, which has made it possible for me to resume my position as a mannequin.
I am 100% in back of President Roosevelt's Recovery Act, and I want every one of my customers to know it.
The the NRA also supported the right of employees to form unions and bargain collectively. Garment workers in New York City used the NRA to win higher wages and better working conditions.
7A.
It was almost enough for a president of this great nation to take account of us foreigners, which is what all of the union members were, practically without any exception.
In the garment industry, yeah.
And acknowledge that things are bad and that workers are permitted to organize.
We must say that the NRA improved our needle industry. We are able now to make a living better than any time before. We work in short hours and get better pay. Long live President Roosevelt.
All right, if I can do that, boy. Hey, I can't do it. Yeah, I would just go back and forth. And that'd be a great thing. You want people to quit bugging you, start that act. And so it started with this initial burst of activity, but write down one more thing for the NRA. It became too complex. It just became too complex. Its codes were too complex, and it favored big business. And within a year and a half, the NRA was clearly not working. And economies of scale, they would make sure that the production quotas would be written in such a way that will allow for the bigger to take advantage of their size. Yeah, just didn't work. And it was very much like central planning. It was almost like communism. And it wasn't communist. It tried to be capitalist, but that's what happened. Oh, I got to show you a cartoon. Don't let me forget. I'll show you a cartoon at the end of the period. If you want to see a cartoon, you want to see a cartoon. Okay, the rest of you don't. You just leave. Just go stand in the corner. Look at the flags. By the way, isn't it great to have the Irish Brigade flag up, right? I don't have an Irish flag, but I got the Irish Brigade and, well, the Wales flag. I got the Irish Brigade. Okay, so this is the first 100 days. They went through a few of the bills, the CCC, the other thing, FARA, and the NRA. And the NRA, just write down one thing. Don't throw your pencil there. Sorry, that was a pin. Just jumped on. This is what step. The NRA, actual bill that did it was the NIRA. And you might see it called the NIRA. And this is just, instead of the National, created the National Recovery Administration, the National Industrial Recovery Act. The I just is industrial. So that's, if you see that it's the same thing. And a couple more laws we have to get that fit in with the CCC. Oh, almost forgot something. In these first 100 days, this is where we'll get what everyone's going to call the first deal. First deal? The first New Deal. And it's going to go into 1934, even though the big laws will be passed in that first 100 days. And this is usually some way they break up the New Deal. I think it's too simple to really show it. These laws are much more complex than this, but I'm going to present it to you because it's mentioned in the book, and who knows where else we might see it, being the test. And it's called the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. But arguably, almost all the bills have 2 or even all 3 of these things. Because the CCC is both. The NRA is all 3. The FARA is relief, but it also is recovery. And so I don't like narrowing them down this much, but I'm presenting these so you can think about them as you go. Because they want to relieve the poor and unemployed, get the country, the economy out going, and then reform so it doesn't happen again. And the New Deal, very good at this, okay at this, very good at this. Not at least until they start getting rid of all the laws. And so let's go through the rest of the first New Deal. Not every law, but there's a few more we have to get. Like the CCC, there's going to be 2 more works programs. The CWA and the PWA. Acronyms. They're so much fun. And they're pretty basic, though. They're really small programs. The Civilian Works Administration, the Public Works Administration. The Public Works was going to build roads, bridges, infrastructure programs, but it was really small. The CWA was more find jobs for people within cities, cleaning streets, cleaning parks, teaching, watching children. This, very small. Along with the CCC, there's a very limited job program. With unemployment well over 25% of the population, they needed much more than this. So these weren't enough, and they would realize it by 1934. But then the next big thing would create many more jobs, and it's called the TVA. You know what the TVA stands for?
Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yep, the Tennessee Valley Authority. And you notice these are all on that list I gave you. Some people have them out. That's a very intelligent thing to do. So we're looking, oh yeah, and getting them out now. The TVA, now, this really is the biggest dam building program we've ever seen. Yeah. Oh, I just got it. Basically what it dealt with is the Tennessee River drainage. And so these central states around Tennessee have built dams throughout this area. Now the Tennessee and the Cumberland River were known for flooding, but not only that, these areas were incredibly cold. Poor. That's it, yeah, poor. The poverty rate was high. And Roosevelt, in his drive around Warm Springs, went in this area. He saw that. Remember, he went there for the cure, even though it didn't quite work. And so what they would do is build dams throughout this area. And they could be used for a number of different things. Flood control, irrigation, but what was the biggie? Electricity. And this would provide electricity for the rural South. And Roosevelt would look back at this as one of the 2 of his programs, 2 New Deal programs that would give him the most pride. In the early 1990s, they would build the FDR Memorial in Washington, D.C. He didn't want one, but they would build it. And one of the biggest parts of that memorial is kind of this cascading waterfall, and it represents the Tennessee Valley Authority. Represents that. Bringing electricity and jobs to this area. And so looking at this, it's all 3. It is all 3 of these things. You got to hire workers that are employed. This not only gets the country going, but it provides for electricity. And in the long run, can provide cheap electricity to allow for industrialization in that area. And it'll be no coincidence that we need a place to begin to do something. It's called the Manhattan Project. Has anyone heard of the Manhattan Project? What did it make? An atomic bomb. They needed someplace to have the first nuclear reactor. You need a lot of electricity. Where is it? Tennessee. Another program that's coming a little bit later, we'll get to, it's called the WPA, the biggest of all the programs. They built a dam here called Grand Coulee and other dams here. That's where they would make the plutonium for the electricity. Don't swim in the water near the Tri-Cities in Washington. Don't go swimming in the Columbia. I'm serious. We were all there in gills. Huh? Now, some of you might think that's cool. So, big program. Is it still radioactive?
No, I don't know.
Okay, you want to immediately grow gills.
Let's please on this.
But it's pretty dirty. It's pretty dirty. Okay, so the next program we have to get. What about farmers? Now, as luck would have it, this would be the first. The Agricultural Adjustment Act. And the Agricultural Adjustment Act would deal with the big problem farmers have. Overproduction and debt. They want to raise prices. This is the goal of the program, to raise prices for farm goods. Their goal, if they can raise prices, would be to save small farms. The head of it would be a man by the name of Henry Wallace, who would be Roosevelt's Secretary of Agriculture. Wallace was from Iowa, an agrarian economist, and he would eventually become Roosevelt's vice president in 1940. He would become one of the most popular politicians in the mid-1940s. Henry. And Wallace's goal, raise prices for farm. The problem, overproduction. So what do? Cut back on production. But if farmers don't produce, they starve. So what do? You pay farmers not to grow crops. Did I say crops? It's been a long day.
It's only 4:03.
Mr. Carter's door is shut.
Somebody else has nothing more
I was going to try it again.
See if you can bounce it off.
Well, I won't see it. Okay.
You can bounce off Taylor's head.
All right, so what it did is it would pay farmers not to grow. Farmers won't grow crops, and then it will make up the difference with a tax on food manufacturers, food processors. A tax on food processors. Pay farmers not to grow, tax. And the reason why is simple. They're the ones who are kind of take advantage of the low prices, so the food processors should pay. And then the idea being, if the prices begin to go up again, you cut off the payments. You cut off the payments. But there's a problem. What about the overproduction right now, 1933? What about all the extra wheat or corn or milk or whatever? What do you do with it? There's overproduction. What do you do to get prices?
Buy it. Create the new.
Remember they showed those workers at Pharaoh, and I was just focusing on their job, right? But they love their job. This is our goal. So think about Wallace and the people he brought in. Same thing. We got to help these small farmers. Prices are too high. We have too much wheat. So what do we do? Destroy it. They can't sell it because it's tariff wars. They destroyed it. They burned hundreds of thousands of bushels of corn, of wheat, just burned. I'll tell you in a sec. They dumped hundreds of thousands, millions of gallons of milk just on the ground. They killed and slaughtered thousands of pigs and horses. They dumped tens of thousands of bushels of oranges into, for example, San Francisco Bay. Then they put armed guards on the piers so poor could not swim out and grab an orange.
I'll tell you this stuff.
There's starvation in the country, and they're destroying the food. That's the problem when you have people all with blinders on thinking one thing: how do we raise prices? But if they gave the food to the poor, what does that do to prices? It drops them even lower. They had a problem. They didn't have the money at that moment because the tax hadn't taken effect. They should have, but they didn't have the program in place. Bought the food at very high prices, ate the loss of prices in the short run. Bought it, distributed it. And then next year get the prices back up. But they didn't do that. And the New Deal is going to be bitterly criticized. You still hear people talking about this. And that was a terrible mistake. They would eventually come up with a way in the second AAA, food stamps. Food stamps would be given to the poor so they could pay for the higher prices so farmers could survive. That's not what it is today. That's what it was then. And this would be the goal.
Did it work though? Did it raise prices?
Yeah. This would be the goal. And there are other problems that favored big, there are problems with it. But the goal of the U.S. government would be to save small farms until 1973. That's not the goal today. Low food prices. And get rid of small farms. Nixon wanted to get rid of them. Desperately wanted to get rid of small farmers. And he did. They're gone. We'll get to Nixon in April. I hate Nixon. Yeah, there, I said it. All right. One more program we have to get. Glass-Steagall. The Glass-Steagall Program is all three, but it's really mostly recovery and reform. Glass-Steagall would regulate the banks. And it is one of the most important bills of the New Deal. It not only put regulations on the bank, how much money they could have, but limitations on what kind of loans. It separated investment from commercial banks. So, all the investment banks, like Lehman Brothers or Glass-Steagall, could not also be commercial banks like Valley Bank or whatever. Yeah, they couldn't be it. And so what was happening was investment banks were gambling the savings of regular people on the stock market. They had to be separate. Yeah.
Is there such a thing as like not the credit score, we don't say, but like as a form of
No, that didn't exist. And we got a really weird credit system in the U.S. The more debt you have, the higher your credit rating. Really, really, really weird. And it also created FDIC. FDIC is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Yeah, the credit ratings won't come into this. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. All banks who entered the system, and by the way, you ever go into a bank and see FDIC? Every commercial of the bank, FDIC? They pay premiums. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. And this will insure people's deposits to stop the run on the banks. And it's been going up with inflation. So it's not $200, it's what, $2,500, and it's a lot more now, $250,000. But the point is this: if a bank has FDIC, that means the bank depositors are protected. There won't be the bank panic. FDIC saved the financial system of the world in 2008. Oh, and each of the cartoons. Remind me to share the cartoon right after the quiz. All right? So every night before you go to bed, who must you thank for not living in a cardboard box by the river? FDR and Senators Glass and Steagall. Oh, they would get rid of this. The separation of investment bank. And they crashed the stocks. They crashed the yeah, and just know the basic about Social Security and I'm going to make it really basic. I had the quiz out for you, Jamie, then I put it away. You just want the key. It'd be a lot easier for both of us.
That's fair. I'll take that.
You get 100%. Oh, and something else. I'm going to have to send a note home for FDR or for JFK. The version I was going to show you didn't work. It's an old videotape I had, tape of the I taped it from TV when it was on, they edited it for TV. So there's one scene where David Ferry basically just continually swears. And you know what word I'm talking about. And that's why I've rated all. One scene. And so they edit that, or the videotape doesn't work.
So does he say that more times than
What's that?
Does he say it more times than
No, but
doesn't that movie have like the record for most times that actor said?
there's another one that's actually not that anymore. I can't remember the movie.
That movie is disgusting.
What movie again?
Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah, I think Wolf of Wall Street did set the record. There was another one I think that has more, but it's the most for a mainstream movie. God, I knew I had him here.
That's fine. I'll just.
We can both share the key.
You can share the key? Okay, those little boxes on the bottom, that's the old, you got home loans, who do they borrow the money from? The company that held the mortgage, who do they sell it to? What did they create? And what was the insurance? So just put it in the boxes.
Okay. I get to write all this?
Yeah, you can write on that.
Oh, we can.
Yeah, I just put the short IDs on line paper. It's easier to read. Now you have the documents.
Yeah.
Underline your pieces. Make sure that you you document. Make sure you use TIP.
Right.
Okay. And have fun with it. Oh, I didn't have the Grange.
So World War I documents, right?
Mm-hmm.